Julia again here, talking about structural yoga today. And again, I'm a yoga teacher, and this is one of my passions, is aligning the body through yoga postures. And so in the previous video, we talked about why structural yoga? What is it? What isn't? What does it do for us? In this video, I want to show some examples of doing some structural practice. So we're going to start with the first pose I'm going to go into is called Virasana. Well, actually, let me just start in Tadasana. We'll just start there, where we are. So Tadasana is our most basic yoga pose, right? Our mountain pose. We stand, there's different schools of thought with Tadasana about your hands and which direction they're facing. In the school that I teach, the palms would be open. So that actually, when the palms are open, it rolls the shoulder heads back and outward and open, which is, again, opens the chest area, the heart, the clavicle, and it lets us breathe better, and it sends a message that we're undefended and relaxed. So palms open in Tadasana, number one. And then again, really feeling that we are opening the clavicle and the shoulders. So there should be a nice feeling of lightness up here in the shoulder and chest region. Okay. Second point. So again, we have these points in the body that I'll mark in Tadasana. And one is the head. And let's just talk about the chin. So let's talk the chin. So we want the chin to be level to the floor, right? We don't want the chin tilting up or tilting. We actually have a slight inward downward tilt that we talk about in yoga. And again, that's what's called engaging the Jalandhara Bandha, the throat lock. So that is basically just to be aware that, the head is not tilted back for sure. The head is level, but then there's an extra kind of pulling back of the head and neck that kind of locks the energy into the throat, but actually what it does is it locks the energy into the torso. So we're pulling energy out of the head, the mind, down into the body. And that is done through an alignment in the way we hold our head. So number one, you can think of your chin, right? And the top of the head. So think of the top of the head being level to the ceiling. The chin is slightly turned in towards the sternum, okay? And then we want to feel that the back of the head, back of the skull, is aligned with the back of the pelvis. So our second brain is our intestines. So you can think of like the brain, it looks like intestines, right? We got the brain, and then we've got, like, this would be the top of our head. So this is basically our second head down here. So we want our skull to be aligned with our other skull, which is our pelvis. Those will be on the same plane in space, right? Head is not behind or forward of the pelvis, okay? Or the sacrum, back of the pelvis. There we are. Okay, so 3 things to be aware of. Head, shoulders, 4 things, sorry. Head, shoulders, hips, and feet. So those are the 4 checkpoints in Tadasana and in any pose. But we'll start with Tadasana because it's a simple pose. So we want the shoulders, again, not to be rounded forward. We want the shoulders to be open, and we can lift them up and draw the shoulder blades down the back into open here. But of course, we're not sticking the chest forward. So these are things I see actually in classes. I'll say, come into Tadasana, and then we'll have people in these awkward, like standing maybe like this, when it's like, actually, what does it feel like to just stand with confidence? Like, how would you stand if you met your mother-in-law? Right? You would probably want to stand as relaxed as possible instead of like this or something, right? So we're trying to relax the body, and that's what Tadasana is, actually. It's a pose a mountain that we stand on of confidence. So shoulders, open, relaxed. Palms are open. Pelvis. We went over this in the last video a lot, but pelvis would be in neutral, meaning that the top of the pelvis is level. It doesn't tip forward. anterior tilt. It doesn't tip backwards. Posterior tilt is backwards, anterior is forward. It doesn't tilt either way. It's level, which means that our tailbone is going to be sticking out, right? If we tuck the tail, we're tipping the pelvis backwards. So there's a lot of things to pay attention to, and there's a lot of habits in this area. So it's about waking up to those habits and how you're holding your pelvis. And that'll change everything mentally too. Okay, so again, if we align the pelvis, then our knees will be aligned, right? We won't have knees knocking. We won't have knees flaring, right? So by doing so, we want to look down at the feet, and we want the toes, we want the outside edges of the feet to be parallel, okay? So that is when we are aligned in Tadasana. And I do want to say there are a couple different variations of holding where the stance of the feet, just to be clear, from the, I guess you would say, more advanced version. And again, it's questionable, but to bring the heels all the way together. And these are different schools too. So this is more of a Iyengar thought, is to bring the heels together. And that means actually the edges of the feet are not parallel. So watch that one if that works for you, because that can work. But, sometimes the body doesn't allow that, the way the body's structured, or the, different weight bearing on the body won't allow that at all. So if that's not possible, the next possible thing is to have the toes slightly touching, the outside the edge of the feet parallel, Tadasana. Again, going from there to find the hip stance or slightly closer. So hip stance. But basically in Tadasana, we never really want to go beyond a hip stance, because then we're turning into, you can feel it right away in your body. When you come from standing, if you come to this pose, there's a shift. So we want to be self-contained. We want the femur bones to be neutral. Knees pointing over the second toe, right, directly forward. And that's our Tadasana. So I just also want to show a seated pose in this video that is helpful for alignment. So this pose is called Virasana, and it happens by taking a block. So the block is actually the modified pose, so I'll show both. And again, I'm not trying to show off by doing this, and I don't expect most people to do this. So don't try this at home if you haven't done this before. But the textbook Virasana, it's called Hero Pose, is to sit directly between the heels onto the floor, right? You've seen people do this probably. Oftentimes young boys have this kind of flexibility in their joints. You see them sitting like this. Over time they lose that ability, but they're sitting right between the heels. And there's different versions of this pose. Supta means lying down, so we have Supta Virasana. So you've seen people lying all the way back on the floor, head on the floor, feet like this, right? That's Virasana. But the point is that we have an internal rotation. This is one of the only poses that will internally rotate both femur bones. In fact, it might be the only pose, but I'll have to think about that. So we got the femur bones internally rotated. Now, I'm going to show the modification. Most of us will be using a block. And again, this is not even possible for some people. So give yourself a break. You can either use one or two blocks. It would look like this, seating evenly. You have sit bones that you sit on, two sit bones on the block. Again, hugging the block with the heels. Sitting like this. Okay, Virasana. And again, the benefit is that the femur bones are internally rotating. And this is going to correct the common misalignment of the femur bones rolling outwardly and standing with your toes facing outward like that. So you may notice if you sit here for even 5 minutes that what it does is it brings energy in right? We bring the energy inward to us when the femur bones roll in. You can notice this when you're talking to people, and when the femur bones roll out, we are externally focused. So that's what we're trying to do, is bring the energy in to our yoga practice, right? To our silence, to our breath, and bring the energy right inside. Okay. So this is Virasana. And once again, it's often difficult to sit like this for the heels. So take another block if that's the case. I recommend seeing if you can try it with some extra padding and just see what it feels like, because it's quite a miraculous pose. There's some really cool benefits it has, and again, aligning the femur bones and the pelvis, and just energetically, there's a nice calming effect from this pose, hero pose. So I think we'll end there with our demo of a couple poses, and I'll go on to the next video. Thank you.